All right, everybody, it is another Tuesday night. It is time for conversations with Commodores, and I know we're a few weeks into the new year, but again, Happy New Year to everybody. We're still 7-6, and we got Pavia back, and we've got Stowers back, and gosh, I'm already ready for spring training, and then the season will be here before you know it. But we've got a unique Commodore with us tonight, one of those few Commodores who played both at Bama and at Vanderbilt. Mac Hereford is one. Tyler Steen was one. And I know there's been some others in the last several years. But Joe, and your kicking leg extraordinaire, thank you for showing up and being here tonight. And I appreciate you working with me on the time, pushing it back a little bit. So thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Joe, you played during a unique time in all of our lives. You were part of that COVID pandemic time period.
What a
And
time to be alive.
yeah, well, that's kind of where I want you to take us to your hometown, your senior year of high school, getting recruited. How is it that you ended up at Bama? And then we're just going to kind of push through those first couple of years because really where I want to talk about obviously is your Vanderbilt years, but I don't want to bypass growing up and then go into the Tide and those kind of things. So take us to there
Sure.
for like your senior year of high school.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, kind of my background is I'm a New Orleans native. I grew up in Mandeville, Louisiana, and played baseball my whole life. And, one of the big unique things about me in particular, which is kind of contrary to a lot of other football guys, is my mom and dad did not let me play tackle football until I was 14.
Oh, wow.
So, and maybe this is the truth of the matter is I wanted to play football more than anything. All my friends got to do it. I knew I could kick a soccer ball further than anybody else. I was like, so you know what? I bet I could be a pretty good kicker. And so basically, how I got into kicking was I had a couple, rinky-dink footballs, little pee-wee sized balls when I was probably about 7, 8 years old, and I started kicking in the backyard and I built a goalpost out of PVC pipes, and it got bigger over the years. And my dad was like, "Oh wow, he's actually kind of serious about this." So dad and I we built a bigger one as I got older, and so it got to be regulation size in the backyard, and then we had to angle it to this field that was out behind uh, our yard, so that way the balls wouldn't go, flying, breaking windows in the neighbors
Right.
next door or anything like that. So, but that's how I got started into kicking. And, I guess jokes on mom and dad, I ended up being the quarterback in high school and taking all sorts of shots. And, I'm just up there with the rest of the guys with the potential for CTE and all that sort of stuff.
Right, right, right.
But transfer, flash forward to my high school career. Um, About senior year, things got pretty heated. I was ranked pretty much number one across the board in as a kicker, and so had a lot of big offers. Was very blessed to have the opportunities that I did, and Alabama came knocking on the door. Coach Saban gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse, and so took off, packed my bags when I was 18. I still remember that ride with mom. Mom was in the car with me. Dad, my brother, my sister, in the SUV ahead. I still remember that ride, my very first ride to Tuscaloosa, and getting packed in and all that good stuff. And I my years at Tuscaloosa were some of the most formative years of my life because I got to learn under Coach Saban, who is the epitome of when you start talking about structure and discipline, and anything less than your best is unacceptable. You're doing yourself a disservice, which was kind of how I was raised in a way. So it wasn't necessarily a big culture shock when I arrived on campus. Mom and dad ran a pretty tight ship growing up. So it was a really unique experience. I was fortunate enough to be around a ton of great people, and I don't think that's talked about enough. Is it and when you're in a program, there's so many people involved. And when I was at Alabama, I had a really good relationship with as many people as I could, and so it takes a village to build the program, and that's what Coach Saban instilled in all of us, like it takes everybody. And then enjoyed my time there. Was fortunate enough we were fortunate enough to win the national championship 2 years, and my first year and my last year. And so I ended up having a little bit of a rough patch at the end where I had to either ride it out, which I already did for a year, or if I wanted to continue my playing career, I needed to jump ship and start somewhere else. And Coach Saban and I had a great conversation about it. And he was very, very supportive. Him and I had a great relationship. We actually went to the same church in Tuscaloosa. So my very first Sunday, I looked across, get a survey on the church, say if we know anybody here, right? And I look right across the aisle, and the pew next to me is Coach and Miss Terry. I'm like, oh, well, hey, y'all, didn't realize you guys were going here. And I'm a Catholic boy from Louisiana, so there's not too many Catholic churches up in.
You probably sat up a little bit straighter and
Yeah, a little incentive to go, every Sunday at 8:45. Yeah, but yeah, and so had a great learning experience at Alabama, and I wouldn't be the man I am today without my time there. Flash forward to jumping to Vanderbilt. I mean, Coach Lee is one of the biggest things that had really stuck out to me, just in my decision-making process of where do I go from here? I spent 4 years at Alabama. I've got 2 years left in the saddle. Where am I going to do it? And I told myself, the first school that comes along that checks all my boxes, great education, opportunity to compete, and at a high enough level. So really those three things. And I told myself, the first school that comes along that shows that they want me, I'm going to go. No questions asked. I'm gone. I want to be somewhere where those three things are available. So, but what has really always stood out to me from the first time I shook Coach Lee's hand is I saw myself in him and the coaches and the players. And it was really awesome to see when you see guys that are like you who are really, really hungry to kind of build something bigger than themselves. And that was one of the biggest things I noticed about Vanderbilt when I got here. That's from the top down, bottom up, you name it. Everybody was on a mission. And, now you see Vandy seeing the success. And the biggest question I get asked is, did you see them having this type of success? I was like, yes. I mean, it's only a matter of time where you got that many people in the building, that many good people in the building, all in line with the same mission. It's only a matter of time. And, it couldn't have happened to better people with the season this year.
You survived through the pandemic season of 20.
Yeah.
And when it was time for you to leave Tuscaloosa, where were you in your academic world, in your journey academically?
So I graduated in 3 years in finance from Alabama. And when COVID came knocking on the door, I was actually in the MBA program. So I spent a year in the MBA program in Alabama. And, when I got to Vandy, or in the process of going to Vandy, I tried to continue that up here. And, they said, oh, no. We don't take those credits. So didn't exactly start off on the right foot there, kind of took a slap to the back there on not being able to continue that, but ended up doing 2 programs at Vandy. But it was a very unique time too, especially how scholarships played out. A lot of people don't remember that you had only a fixed number of scholarships, and the NCAA granted all the guys who were eligible that year could come back on scholarship and basically get another year, but they were still fixated on 85. So it was a weird dynamic.
That never made sense to me, because it forced a lot of athletes and coaches to make really weird decisions, tough decisions about academics and athletics. Joe, you
To
go.
that, I actually, the only guy we brought in, I found out, and I didn't find out until well after I got to Vandy, is I was the only scholarship guy they brought in 2020 after that 2020 season. And Barton Simmons told me that. I was like, that can't be right. And then I was like, oh yeah, Yeah, it is. Holy cow.
Well, it just from my outsider's perspective, it allowed Clark and Barton to kind of continue to move that needle, if you will, within the roster to get their guys on board. And now we just completed Team Four's season with, I'd say, probably 98% of the roster is Clark and Barton's doings.
Hmm.
So what you saw in those first 2 years, those tough seasons,
Oh yeah.
was the groundwork for what they're seeing now, the success. So that's one of the things I was really wanting to chat with you about because it's right in your prime first 2 years on campus was
Hmm.
all of the hard work. Not that it's not hard work now, but all of that just groundbreaking work because it changed. I know you didn't have the Derek Mason culture in years, but you had a lot of that roster that was
Right.
the, but and Coach Lee and Coach Mason are two very, very different philosophies and uh, personalities. But I want to ask you this. You go from arguably the most successful program in the country, probably in the history of college football, to a team that hasn't had that success in many decades. Certainly doesn't have the championships. We have, every so often have had good seasons.
Hmm.
But from a competitor standpoint, can you kind of compare a little bit of what you came from to what you went to? Because I know it's a stark contrast. Facilities, expectations, history. Kind of talk a little bit about that observation.
Sure. So one thing I've always come to appreciate is nobody wants to win more than the players and the coaches associated with the program. It doesn't really matter where you are,
Mhm.
whether it's Alabama, Vanderbilt, it doesn't matter what level of ball, D1, D2, D3. Everybody wants to do, everybody wants to win when the time comes, and nobody wants to win more than the players and the coaches. But Coach Saban always preached, are you willing to do whatever it takes to prepare to win? Are you doing what's necessary to give you the best opportunity to be successful when the time comes? Because everybody wants to win when the time comes, but are you willing to do what's necessary throughout the year to put yourself in that position? That was there, and I wouldn't say anything was necessarily different at Vandy. I would say at Vanderbilt there was the same philosophy of we have everything we need to do. We have to, obviously there were a few differences here and there. We're building a program at Vandy, right? The margin for error is a lot slimmer. But do we have everything in the room that we need to win? Absolutely. And so we had a lot of good character kids, especially in the year two.
Mhm.
Year one, some guys were kind of, testing the waters a little bit. But the guys who were all in, you could see it all in their face. You
Mhm.
could see how they approach practice, how they talk to people, how they talk to one another. Um, so I came from a program that was well established, the culture and the um, uh, basically the baseline, the foundation was built, and you had this standard that you met every single day. At Vanderbilt, you're trying to move the standard every day.
Mhm.
And I think the most successful guys I've been around, whether it's at Vandy or Alabama, they're constantly trying to raise the bar, not only on themselves, but for the people around them, bring everybody up. And so there's those guys on both teams, just very different positions in where the teams were, obviously.
Mhm. From an athletic standpoint, from a competition standpoint, compare just a little bit about the competition you had at Bama and the competition you had when you came in at Vanderbilt.
Are you talking just position specifically,
Yeah,
or
for your positions, yeah. Just
yeah?
from
So um, pretty similar. Um, Bama was very much, you know, scholarship focused, where but the competition's a competition.
yeah.
When I came in, we had J.K. Scott at punter. You
Mhm.
know, elite level guy, still playing in the NFL, one of the top guys in the NFL. So from a sheer competition perspective, even at the specialist position, is very, very high.
Mhm.
But once you've established yourself, like, Saban was very, very loyal to his guys. Once you establish yourself, very rarely does he make it a change unless it makes sense or they have to.
Sure.
Like JK was one of the best punters I've ever seen. And so that's kind of how the standard was over there.
Mhm.
And that was true with every position. I mean, Saban was always going to play, no matter what position you played, the
Yeah.
best guy who gave a chance to win. The Jalen and Tua situation,
Mhm.
everybody knows about that. It was what needed to be done to win the game. No, congratulations or disrespect to either one. They're both extremely successful quarterbacks and great guys. Are some of the most professional guys I've ever been around. But coaches that way, Coach Saban's that way. He's going to make sure the right guys are going to be on the field and put the rest of the team in a position to
Yeah.
win. And that's the same way at Vandy. You had guys that were talented. You had guys who are walk-ons scratching and clawing to play. They saw it as an opportunity to play. Uh, and we played a lot of walk-ons at Vandy, especially those first 2 years,
Mhm.
because they were good. We had some really good walk-ons at Vandy. And not to say we didn't at Alabama, but at Vandy, we had a lot of guys that were itching to get on the field, itching to make an impact, guys wanting to win more than anything. And, in 2022, we were very, very close. We were one game away from
Mhm.
making a bowl game, finished 5-7. Really hard to take at the end of the day with as talented of a team that we did have. So the competition never changes. The structure never really changes. I mean, when I got to Vandy, I was one of like four guys competing for the kicking job. At Bama, it's usually, you got two guys going at it at each position for a specialist. But at Vandy, it was an all out, four or five guys swinging their legs trying to get. But one thing about me is I'm extremely competitive. So if we need to kick every day, I'm gonna put my money on me because I've trained myself to make sure my leg doesn't fall off. When
Mhm.
guys' legs will fall off on day 3 or 4, it's like, oh no, I'm good. You kicked 5 days in a row. That's fine.
Well, and I want to talk about that, as for any successful athlete, regardless of what level of competition, you have to have a confidence in your abilities. And it doesn't matter who is on the other side of the line, if you're playing line or who's lined up at DB and you're a receiver, it's a different, to me, it's a different mentality. I've always heard from a kicker's standpoint, a place kicker standpoint, you got to forget your last kick. If it's a miss, it's like being a relief pitcher. If you didn't
Mhm.
strike them out or have success the last time, you got to come clean slate. But I've never kicked. So I want you to kind of address that confidence as an athlete and how did you regain it if you ever lost it for periods of time? What was the mental Olympics, if you will, that you had
Sure.
or hurdles that you, as a successful kicker athlete, what did you do to regain it if you ever lost it?
Yeah, I think any athlete has to go through that. Like you said, it's not something it's going to happen. At any kicker or any guy who's played the game long enough will hit slumps.
Mhm.
And any guy that has says, "Oh, no, never, missed a couple in a row," or pitcher who walks two guys in a row, kind of your pitching analogy that you gave,
Mhm.
they either aren't good enough to be out there or they're lying to you.
Mhm.
And so my biggest thing is when I say, have the sloppy game, not up to my standard to where I could sleep at night, it's going to bother me. Like any other competitor, it's going to bother the daylights out of you. But how you respond to that really says everything about your maturity as a competitor. And so my biggest thing was I'm going to go back to doing simple better. I'm going to hone in on my mechanics. If your ball's tailing left every time, okay, that's something we need to iron out. It might not bite you this week, but maybe next week it'll bite you. So being aware of the little nuances in the game of your craft all the time, but not being overly picky because we're always trying to close the gap between where we are and being perfect. We'll
Mhm.
never get to perfect, but we can close the gap and get pretty close if we, really hone in on things. So my biggest thing was if I was in a slump, do simple better. Go back to the basics. Drill work. You don't have to swing a million times. It's like a pitcher. You don't have to, throw a bullpen just to get everything out. Sometimes it's better to not throw for a few days. Or like a kicker. Sometimes it's better to not kick for a few days. And so that way, when you're out there, you're itching to get swing your leg again. And so just do simple better. You know how to kick. You don't have to reinvent the ham sandwich. So it was about getting back to the basics, doing simple better, and focusing on the process rather than the result.
What about from the fundamentals standpoint? You mentioned you know what to do. You were
Right.
obviously, I'm assuming, either self-taught or you had some coaching along the way. But by the time you get to Vanderbilt, this is not new to you. You've done this for many years. But did you have a kicking coach at Vanderbilt or someone you relied upon, maybe from back home or in the
Mhm.
kicking world that you could consult with? Or was this kind of just amongst your peers that you figured these things out?
Yeah, so early on in my career and really up until I got to Vanderbilt, I was all self-taught.
Mhm.
And very rarely do you see that now. Back in my day, when I was coming out of high school in 2017, you did see that. You didn't see a lot of guys going to coaches. And then, really, right after I got into the college realm, things started changing to where you start getting a coach. You see more and more high school guys with a coach. Oh, I go see this guy. I see this guy,
Right.
once a month or whatnot. And you know, I was able to get consistent feedback and drill work and drills essentially to better my craft when I went to a coach. And his name is Dan Orner. He trains a lot of NFL, a lot of college guys, punters, kickers. And so he does a phenomenal job with what he does. But
Mhm.
that when I got to Vandy, I had a clear cut process. I'm gonna warm them up with 8 of these no steps. I'm gonna do 8 more of these step back no steps. I'm gonna go 10 one steps. And then I'm gonna go, 10 fulls going back, teetering on the hashes, all the way back to 55 or 60. That's my warm up. Then we're ready for the period. It's crisp. We're in and out. That's our day, unless we have kickoff.
Mhm.
So I got a coach when I first got to Vandy, essentially, or right before. And that made a huge difference to me. It's like, just having a raw pitcher. He may be really, really talented, have a live arm,
Mhm.
but he can be all over the place at times. And so I I owe a lot to my coach, Dan, who really refined me and kind of honed me in and said, hey, your percentage is good from your time at Alabama. We can do better, though. Let's hit the ground running when we get to Vandy and let's streamline our efforts so that you have the best chance to go to the NFL. And so that was my goal, was to play 2 great years at Vandy, have an opportunity in the NFL, had a couple opportunities, but I wouldn't have had those opportunities without my coach. So it was a big deal to me to have somebody to refer back on.
Where was he based?
He was out of Charlotte, North Carolina. He still is. And so it's kind of funny. He's got like a little monopoly over
Mhm.
the kickers and punters over in the Carolinas, a couple guys from Georgia. And so he's got a few guys in the NFL, really talented guys, and a lot of guys in college. Like a lot of people will go to him in the off season, refine their craft, and he does a phenomenal job.
That's very cool. I know that there are these quarterback mavens are all around the country, and I suspected there are kicker versions as
It's
well.
it's a smaller market, but
Right.
they're out there.
Right. Joe, I want you to stay on that line of mindset of a kicker. And I'm not going to pick on one particular guy, but this game comes to mind when we saw the Arizona State Texas game. Bert Auburn from Texas has been a fairly consistent guy, but you just saw it, at least, and maybe I'm looking too much into it. The body language and looking at what they showed it to be his face, it was like, is this moment too big for him? Or maybe I'm misreading it. But even the best of kickers, even the Justin Tuckers of the world, they're gonna miss. And it may not have anything to do with anything except maybe it's psychological. I don't know, but that's what I want you to address. That mindset that, let's say you've missed a couple, but now it's time for the kick. How do you block out and just focus on what you need to be able to be successful?
Yeah, it's a really tough ask. You know, you can go into a kick feeling really, really good if you've had, you've made 3 or 4 in a row,
Mhm,
feeling good, you feel confident.
mhm,
But if regardless of if you made the last 4 or missed the last 4, those past performances do not dictate future returns, you
right.
know? So it was all, at least back to me, it was always do simple better, focus on your process with the kick rather than the outcome. You know how to kick a darn football. Let's blast that thing right down the. I used to envision a light pole down the middle of the uprights.
Mhm,
And basically, my goal was to hit the top of that imaginary light pole on
mhm,
a line. Not loopy, not get under it, but to blast through it. Basically, hit the lights on
mhm,
the light poles. And but when you have to, so I went back to like doing simple better. But the mindset I always try to take was no fan, no noise can block this kick.
mhm,
I trust my protection. I trust my holder. I trust my snapper. We've done this a million times,
mhm,
and they simulate this all the time in practice for specialists.
mhm,
You're probably in this scenario, probably game winner or game tying field goal once a week, every 2 weeks, whatever it is. Every program will mimic this in a practice situation. I mean, at Vandy, Coach Lustig would get the entire team around me,
mhm,
and they would be yelling all sorts of,
mhm,
some things you can't necessarily say on the show.
mhm,
And but I was in that situation like once a week, once every 2 weeks. So
mhm.
when the situation arose, it was kind of, well, they don't really stand a chance. We've been in this situation before. We're just gonna knock it through.
Mhm.
But to take all that other stuff doesn't affect your kick. So I try to think about it from a physical lens. All right, operation, keep everything the main thing. Nothing else really matters.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it's all just a bunch of noise.
But Joe, when you hit it just right and you know you've got the distance, do you even have to look that it's going through? I know you
They
do look. I know that. But when you hit
right.
it just right, it's like hitting a home run.
It is.
It's like you barely touched it.
Uh-huh.
Am
Yeah.
I somewhat on that?
You are somewhat on that. And it's funny you bring that up because my first kick at Vandy was actually I actually did that. And it was kind of dumb looking back, but I was so fired up. It was my first kick
Hmm.
back in action, and it was from 53 yards.
Hmm.
And as soon as I hit it, I saw the line, got really fired up. And then I was like, I better go make sure I made that just to make sure because I just saw it take off and got really fired up. But yeah, it is like that, when you hit a baseball flush and sometimes, like you said, it feels like it barely touches the bat. You're like, did I really get a piece of that? And then you
Well,
take a peek and it's going over the scoreboard. You're like, oh yeah.
Well, I kind of set you up because your introduction to the Vanderbilt fan world and team is the man hits a 50 plus yarder and it looks like a chip shot. He just took his 9 iron out and then he's walking back to the to the cart because he knows it's either in the hole or it's a gimme. But that's got to be the best of feelings for you as a competitor. And you don't get that all the time. Even the best of kickers don't get to feel that. I want you to
Oh,
take us the other end of the spectrum when you know you have just shanked it, or it is just a bad hold or a bad snap, and you've
yeah.
done the best that you can with your part but it's a three-part system here. I held for a couple of years, and back in my day, I'm so old, we used a tee for the first couple of years, and that was
Yeah.
horrible. But talk about the miss kicks. I don't mean the one that where you literally have missed the field goal, but where you've missed the contact. What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. And and like I said before, any kicker that says, oh, like, I don't miss hit them, or, I haven't missed in the big game.
Mhm.
One, they're either lying to you. Two, they weren't even out there if they're
Right,
saying, if,
right.
yeah, it's one or the other. And, when I hit a bad one, doing this for as long as you have, it's like a pitcher. You just release that fastball and it's going in the dirt. You held on to it just a little bit long.
Mhm.
Release was a little bit off. It's very similar. And so, or it's like rolling over when you're at the plate and you roll over and it's a chopper to third. You're like, all right, I'm out. But you can tell right away it's and I'm never the guy to kind of blame it, point fingers.
Mhm.
And I know there's a couple times where I told a snapper, won't give any names. I had a bunch of snappers throughout my years, but I was like, do you realize like you're putting way too much pressure on yourself? You're the snapper. When somebody misses a kick, you know who they look at and say, bunch of not very nice four-letter words to? Me.
Yeah, it's
I'll
not the holder or most of the time, and it's certainly
it's
not
not the right.
unless you
It's not the
snap it over the
holder.
head.
Right. It's not the holder. It's not the snapper. It's the kicker. He's the problem. So I kind of got this guy. I was like, man, let me take care of the kick. You just get it back here. Don't put any pressure on yourself. Throw it at his hands. Let us take care of the rest. We're gonna be just fine. And it's a three-person operation. You got your holder, your snapper, and your kicker. And that ball from where it leaves the snapper's hands to when, say, my foot makes contact with it, it's got to be off in 1.3 seconds.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
that is cooking in the grand scheme of things when you think about it. So basically, what a kicker sees, for those of you who might not know, by the time the ball's down, you're probably into your last step of your approach,
Mhm.
somewhere in that frame. So you're already halfway through your motion, essentially an approach to the ball, and that ball is still moving. So you talk about consistent form, consistent approach, consistent swing, and counting on your holder to get it down from wherever the snap was.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like, when we would make a kick, show appreciation. It's not an easy gig. It is
No.
running like a top, and we don't blow on it. We want that thing spinning.
That ball is placed on the ground, and oh, excuse me, the length of time the ball is actually on the ground is such a fraction of a second if it's timed correctly. But the last
Yep.
thing, because we're getting a little too in the weeds for everybody but me and you on this. So right now
It's
is
fun.
I can't remember the game. I think it was earlier this year in college where a kicker, I mean, excuse me, where a holder, he's putting the ball down and looking at the cameraman and doing number one sign before the kicker makes contact and he makes the kick. I don't know if you remember if you saw this, but I got to go find it. The fact that the holder finds the cameraman and holds up the number one sign is just next world. But
That's pretty funny.
yeah.
I knew an operation. I think it was yeah, it was in the old Red River rivalry. So
Hmm.
Texas and Oklahoma,
Hmm.
when the holder did something a little bit more explicit to signal for the ball. His fist
Yeah.
was like this, and he has hand
Right.
down for and he moved a certain finger
Yeah.
that gives a little message, and they snapped the
Huh.
ball on that, and he made the
Wow.
kick.
Wow. Wow. Guys, I've got Joe Bulovas. He kicked for us in 21 and 22. And now that you're, what are you, the ripe old age of what, 24? Are you 25? How old are you?
I'm 26 now.
No, I know. I'm
I
kidding.
was 23 when those freshmen were coming in.
Right,
It was
right.
crazy.
Were
17, 18-year-old kids.
they calling you Unc or Grandpa at that point?
Yeah, yeah, they were there was a lot of, man, you're old. I was like, you're young.
That's right. Well, Joe, I want we're going to get back to your time at Vanderbilt, but I want to talk about the just incredible duo that we had this past year on the roster. Both those guys made all these postseason honors. What the Brockett launcher made, I think, 5 50+ yard kicks, which I don't think has ever been done in the Vanderbilt history in a single season. The kid is just that both those guys are so accurate, such great kickers. But from your perspective, what is it that you liked about what you saw this year from those guys?
Yeah, so Jesse, Mirko, and Brock Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
What I liked about that room in particular is the guys got along really well.
Mm-hmm.
There were some times where things weren't really meshing at certain points in the year, but
Mm-hmm.
they were able to get things running like they never missed a beat.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really impressed with Brock as a younger guy being able to step into the fire after having some missed kicks and being able to produce the way that he did following those setbacks. So, and it says a lot about how he carries himself as a competitor, and he did a phenomenal job this year. Really great job there. And Coach Lepak is a great coach. He's a special teams coordinator now for Vanderbilt. Funny story, he actually recruited me at Syracuse way back when. So it's funny how all that happens.
Was Clark at Syracuse at that time? No, he would have been at Notre Dame, I think, at that time.
No,
I think Clark
I
was at Syracuse well before that. I'm sorry. I think it was at Notre Dame.
no big deal. But yeah, I think if I'd gone there, we would have just missed each other some way somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But and then Jesse, he's done a really nice job, obviously too. That whole room's done a really good job of just being, that they're other than Brock, Jesse and Julian have played a lot of ball. And for those of you who don't know, Julian Ashby, he's the long snapper, and those two guys have played a lot of football together. Not together, but a lot of football games in college under their belt. So that certainly helps Brock in his development as a younger guy. And for a first year guy to have a guy that is holding for like year 4,
Yeah.
5, whatever it is, that makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Not just one in the games because he's experienced, but he has all practice to work with him,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. That things aren't quite right. All right, let's get a bunch of snapping holes and let's iron this out. So you can constantly work on that all the time. And so they blended really well this year. And it was really fun to watch them, and it was fun to have them have success and see that.
When Brock made that 50+ yarder at the end of the first half against Texas, that was such a big lift, such a
Absolutely.
confidence builder. Um, but anyway, I wanna step back. You leave Bama, you come to campus. Had you been on campus previously? Had you taken a visit, or did you know the campus at all before you reported to school?
No, I actually did not. It was COVID, and so it was a very strange time as far as how the official visits operated, who could be on campus, when. So I never took an official visit or anything like that. Basically, they figured out, okay, you can get into school. Like I already verbally committed. Hey, you can get into school. All right, good to go. And so the first time I got to shake Coach Lee's hand is actually right after our first summer practice, essentially, a little 7-on-7 deal. And other than that, no visits, nothing like that. It was a very different time.
Well, I know that Mac was still on campus and maybe was finishing. I don't know if y'all overlapped a year. Um, Maybe in 21, was Mac on the roster at that point? Um,
He
I can't
he was
remember.
done before I got to Vanderbilt, but him and I played together when we were at Alabama.
Yeah, I knew that y'all had been teammates then, and I know that. And then I want to say maybe Tyler was still on the roster for that maybe a year. But anyway, I'm just talking about guys who've been in both programs. What was it about the campus? What was it about student life away from football that really you found that was a good experience for you?
You know, I'll be honest with you, my time at Vanderbilt was very much focused on school and football.
Hmm.
So I didn't go get to know much about the campus.
Hmm.
For those of you who were in the Owen school, you only stay at Owen
was gonna
for
say.
your. So that's where I was, and So it was just school and football. But what I loved is the fact that my closest friends that I have now are all from Vanderbilt, and they're really great people. That's one of the biggest things I picked up from my time at Vanderbilt was just a great uh, place to find some good kids that were I saw myself in. Competitive, care about one another, and want the best for one another. And so I saw that at Vandy. And so uh, being able to be part of a family like that, it goes a long way. And everybody who is part of the Vanderbilt community knows it's a smaller one, but it's probably one of the best.
All right, I ask this in almost every show. If you can say it, what is the group text name for your former Vanderbilt teammates that you're still in and communicate in?
Man, that's a good one. Because we actually don't have that. We don't have a name on it, I believe. We've got a group message for the guys who are still in Nashville from
Hmm.
Vanderbilt.
Hmm.
Um, hmm, yeah, we don't actually have a name for
Well, I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, but
that.
during your years at Bama or at Vandy, did you ever get to play at LSU or at Tulane?
I never played at Tulane, but we did play at LSU.
Did you get to play in that game or those games?
Hmm.
And
Yeah, the
how
place
many
is pretty.
how many tickets did you have to get for that game?
Yeah, there were a few extra tickets we had to request for that game. But one thing along those lines, as far as tickets go, is it was such a unique experience to be playing at LSU
Mhm.
because well, it's in my backyard essentially, but it was kind of like a I had gone on a ton of visits there. Thing obviously that we didn't see eye to eye and end up going to the same place there. But playing at LSU when I was at Alabama it was really really neat. I actually grew up with Coach Ogeron's boys, Parker and Cody. So when every time we essentially play them, Coach O was there. Say hi to my old buddies and stuff like that. And it was kind of funny because when I committed to Alabama, we were all friends. And so Coach O's got the job at LSU and he's cooking up steaks for us and we're hanging out at this pool and me and Parker and Cody are throwing the ball and whatnot. So it was a really unique thing to be playing at Alabama and then, play at LSU. But we took care of business all but 1 years there. So
Parker and Cody have the same accent as Coach O.
not quite. Not
Not
too
as
I don't
thick.
know. I don't know anybody that has an accent as thick as him.
Maybe what the coach on the Waterboy movie. It's, that's
Farmer Fran.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Joe, we've got a few more minutes, but I want to talk about the impact that Vanderbilt had on you just as a person, not necessarily just as a football player or just as a student, but I mean overall. You were there for a couple of years. I'm hoping the experience overall was a positive one, but
Absolutely.
what's the impact now? You've been gone a couple of years and just kind of reflecting back a little bit. Did you think it was a good decision for you? Are you happy about that?
Yeah, you could say I'm pretty happy about it. It's brought me relationships that I could not replace, and so I, I have the utmost respect for people like Coach Lee and Barton, and everybody from top down and bottom up. Like, there's nobody I wouldn't run through a brick wall for. And my time at Vanderbilt was very different from my time in Alabama,
Mhm.
but my time at Vanderbilt was very, very special and unique to me because they took a chance on me. They gave me an opportunity to revive my career. And so you talk about a place that's really special to me and means a lot to me because they gave me an opportunity. I can't really put it into words because that was a really, transitionary period in my life. It was sink or swim. And so this was the place where I got to, make it happen. And but a lot of people I think would say, Vanderbilt is kind of where you go to better yourself. You don't necessarily see it while you're there, but you certainly learn to appreciate and look back on and say, oh, I'm way better now because of what I went through at Vanderbilt, whether it's academically, athletically, the relationship based program that Coach Lee's built. I feel extremely blessed to have been part of that program.
I know that you were an asset to the program the years that you were there. You and I got to hang out a little bit before the Birmingham Bowl last month.
Yeah.
What did that bowl victory mean to you, sitting in the stands, seeing a bunch of your teammates being able to perform and to win that big game against Georgia Tech?
Yeah, well, first off, hats off to the coaches because I know how that staff operates, and I know they were probably losing sleep on Christmas while they were down there
Mhm.
preparing for that game. Coach Key for Vanderbilt was actually at Alabama with me my freshman year. He was the offensive line coach there before he went to Tech, and but it was really fulfilling to see guys have success, not only in the bowl game, but this year. The staff has busted their tails for several years now, and it's rewarding to see them have success being on the outside now. Maybe selfishly, I wish, maybe I was part of that, but, it's
Hey,
whatever.
hey, count me in on that as well.
Right, right. And, but, when you see good people have success, you can't help but smile and be so happy for them. So, from Coach Lee Pack, Coach Lee, Barton, Coach Black, Coach Hay, Lazinski, all the way down. The coaches, I mean, the coaches that really stuck with Coach Lee through the really hard times, I've got the utmost respect for them because they're great people. I haven't met a coach or a player at Vandy that I can't consider a friend. And so I think that says a lot about the character of the people in the building. Um, but it was really rewarding to see. I was glad that I was able to come down and see all the fun stuff. So they deserve it more than anybody.
No, it was just a fun, magical day and weekend for
There
Vanderbilt
was.
everywhere. How's the kicking leg? How much in shape is that leg these days? Are you still kicking
Well,
from time to time, or are we done?
it, well, it's funny you say that. There's been stranger things that happen in
Mhm.
that department. I probably kick about 2 or 3 times a week,
Mhm.
and if I never get a call, that's okay. I feel pretty blessed to have played as long as I have. If I do, great, man, awesome. Well, let's see where that takes me. But right now, I'm still in pretty good shape, if not better shape than I was when I was playing. But I also work for Raymond James as an advisor, so that keeps me pretty busy as well.
I'm going to have to assume that your range now is better, longer than your range at age 12 or 13. So you're not kicking in your yard. I assume you've gone to a school that has a field.
Yeah, I'll go to actually Vanderbilt. I'll go to the indoor. Yep.
There we go. There's a
Yeah.
perk right there.
Yeah,
Um,
they've got nets and everything. I don't have to go chase it down the
that's
block
right.
anymore.
And you may even find an equipment manager to help you out a little bit. But Joe,
That's asking a lot there.
we've had a post-game field storming of historic proportions after the Bama game. We all know about that. But in the last 2 weeks, we've now had two court stormings after beating top 10 Kentucky and Tennessee in back-to-back Saturdays. So the current fines, I think, are at like 850. Are are you the one starting up that GoFundMe so that Candace doesn't have to dip into that NIL money to pay those fines to the SEC, or am I just making all that up?
Man, I should just start a GoFundMe for myself because I'm just that awesome. I could
There we
maybe
go.
so. I'm
There
just
we
kidding.
go.
But it's funny. I was actually talking to this to a friend of mine who works at Vanderbilt today, and he used to work in athletics, and now we were talking about today as far as and I said, one day we're going to be to the point where everybody wants to do a court storming or a field storming against us. And that way, you've arrived. And Coach Saban used to say it every now and then. the press, he wouldn't say it to us. He didn't want anybody getting a big head.
Right.
But when I was, he would say it to the press, was like, when you beat Alabama, it's a tremendous occasion. You should storm the field because it's never going to happen again, or something like that. And
Right.
so once Vandy gets that way, then I think we'll see a lot less court stormings on our end, and maybe other people will do that. So let's try and get to that.
You know, when you see Candace pleading with the student section to not storm the court at the end of the Kentucky game, you know,
Right.
it's the cost of success is what it is. And we're having a resurgence of sports in probably all phases of the athletics on
And that's
campus.
awesome to have that
It really,
enthusiasm again. It's really fun to see.
you know, it really is. And you had to go through some growing pains your years, but now we're seeing the fruits of that labor. So Big Leg Joe, thank you for your time at Vanderbilt and setting the stage for frankly teams 3, 4, and now upcoming 5. So the part that you played, we thank you for all of that.
Well, I appreciate that. It was a blessing just to be part of the team, and so I'm trying to give back in any way I can now.
Well, I appreciate you spending some time, not only pregame before the Birmingham Bowl back in December, but us getting to chop it up a little bit tonight. And I appreciate you sharing a little bit of your story with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And I hope to see you next month when I come up to town, but I'll talk to you offline about that. Guys, we got Coach Jerry DiNardo next Tuesday. You guys know he coached for us in the 90s. There's a whole bunch of folks on this in this group who played for Coach DiNardo. So if you got questions you want me to answer or ask ahead of time, send them to me. But it's going to be a great conversation next week. But as always, anchor down.